Welcome to Nightmare Fuel Stories. The beacon's call the Lighthouse has always been my sanctuary. For 30 years, I've watched over these waters, guided ships safely to harbor, and kept the rocky shores from claiming more lives than they already have. The locals in Port Carlisle call me Old Man Thorn, though I'm only 53. I suppose 3 decades of solitude ages a man beyond his years. My lighthouse stands sentinel on Blackrock Point, a jagged outcropping that juts into the North Atlantic like a bony finger. The nearest neighbor is 4 miles down the coast, and the village proper lies 7 miles inland. It's a lonely existence, but I've never minded. The sea has been better company than most people I've known. But something changed 3 weeks ago, something that's made me question everything I thought I knew about these waters, about this lighthouse, about reality itself. It began with the fog. September brings fog to these parts, that's nothing unusual, but this fog was different. It rolled in from the east rather than the north, thick as wool and unnaturally still. No wind disturbed it. It simply appeared one morning, as if the sea had exhaled a breath it had been holding for centuries. I was in the middle of my morning routine, checking the lamp, recording weather conditions, performing maintenance on the old diesel generator, when I noticed the silence. Normally the lighthouse is alive with sound, waves crashing against the rocks below, gulls crying overhead, the constant moan of the wind. But that morning, nothing, just a heavy blanket of quiet that pressed against my eardrums until they ached. The foghorn automatically sounds in conditions like these, but it remained silent. I checked the system and found nothing wrong. The sensors were registering clear conditions. Impossible. I could barely see 20 feet beyond the gallery. I manually overrode the system and the horn bellowed out its warning. The sound seemed to travel nowhere, absorbed by the fog rather than cutting through it. Still, I felt better knowing ships would have some guidance. That night I spotted the first vessel. I was in the lantern room, making sure the light was functioning properly. The main beacon swept its path across the water as it has every night for over a century. Through gaps in the fog I caught glimpses of the sea below, black and glassy. Then I saw it, a ship's running lights, green and red, moving slowly through the mist. Nothing unusual about that. Ships pass by Blackrock Point regularly, though most modern vessels rely more on GPS than lighthouse beacons these days. But something about this ship tugged at my memory. The configuration of the lights wasn't quite right for a modern vessel. I grabbed my binoculars and trained them on the ship. What I saw made my blood run cold. It was a steamer, not one of those tourist replicas, but a genuine coal-burning passenger steamer of the sort that hadn't sailed these waters in at least 70 years. Its hull was black, its superstructure white, and despite the distance, I could make out figures moving on the deck. I immediately radioed the Coast Guard. "This is Blackrock Lighthouse. I've spotted what appears to be a steamer about 2 miles offshore, heading nor-northeast. No registry visible. Vessel appears to be antiquated." The radio crackled with static before the response came. "Blackrock, this is Coast Guard Station, Port Carlisle. We're showing no vessels in your vicinity. Repeat, no vessels on radar within 5 miles of your position." "That's impossible," I said. "I'm looking at it right now." The words died in my throat. The ship was gone. Where it had been sailing just moments before, there was nothing but fog and darkness. "Blackrock, please confirm your last transmission." Never mind, must have been a trick of the light. Blackrock out. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I pored over the lighthouse records, kept meticulously by each keeper since the station was established in 1883. I found what I was looking for in the entries from April 1947. April 17, 1947, heavy fog. Sighted the SS Meridian passing northbound at approximately 23:15 hours. Vessel reported lost with all hands in 1912. Third such sighting this month. God help me, I am not mad. The entry was signed by Franklin Morse, the keeper who had held the position for 27 years before retiring suddenly in 1948. The official record stated he left due to health concerns, but local gossip had always hinted at something more troubling. Some said he'd gone mad from the isolation. Others claimed he'd developed an unhealthy obsession with shipwrecks. Now I wondered if there might be truth to those rumors. The next morning the fog remained, thick and unyielding. I tried calling the mainland on both the radio and my cell phone, but got nothing but static from the former and no service from the latter. The internet connection was down as well, not entirely unusual during bad weather, but the timing made me uneasy. I decided to review the automated logs from the navigation system. Modern lighthouses like Blackrock have been upgraded with digital monitoring that tracks nearby vessels using AIS, Automatic Identification System. Every commercial ship is required to broadcast its identity, position, and other information. The logs showed nothing unusual until 23:15 the previous night, the exact time I'd spotted the steamer. There was a brief entry, unknown vessel detected, signal anomaly, system reset initiated. After that, nothing. Just as the Coast Guard had said, no vessels had registered on any system. That night I saw another ship. This one was different, a three-masted schooner, sails full despite the lack of wind, moving with purpose through the fog. I didn't bother calling the Coast Guard. Instead, I grabbed my camera, a digital SLR with a powerful zoom lens, and took several photographs. When I reviewed them on the camera's screen, my hands began to shake. The ship was there clear as day, but the deck was empty. No crew manned the sails or stood at the wheel. More disturbing were the sails themselves. They were tattered and burned, with great holes that should have rendered them useless. Yet the vessel moved steadily through the water as if pulled by an unseen hand. I returned to the records, searching for any mention of a schooner. I found it in an entry from 1932. October 31, 1932, All Hallows Eve. Spotted the Eliza Jane tonight, God rest her poor souls. Burned and sank during the great storm of 1887. 45 years gone, yet she sails still. They say time thins on this night, but I never believed until now. For the next week, the pattern continued. Each night, different vessels appeared in the fog. A fishing trawler from the 1970s, a WWII destroyer, a luxury yacht that had famously disappeared in these waters in 1998. Each one appeared at precisely 23:15, sailed within view of the lighthouse for exactly 7 minutes, then vanished back into the mist. And each night, I found corresponding entries in the logs of previous keepers, spanning more than a century. I was not the first to witness this phenomenon, but none of the records indicated what it meant or why it was happening. The fog never lifted. Days blended together, marked only by the subtle shift from gray to black and back again as the sun rose and set behind the impenetrable mist. My supplies were holding steady. I always kept enough food and water for at least a month, and the generator had fuel to last twice that long. But my nerves were another matter. Sleep became elusive, my dreams haunted by ships filled with silent, staring figures. I began to dread the approach of 23:15 each night, yet I couldn't stop myself from climbing to the lantern room to watch for the next apparition. On the 10th night, everything changed. The vessel that appeared was modern, a container ship, massive and well-lit. I recognized it immediately as the Meridian Star, a ship that regularly passed through these waters on its route between New York and Liverpool. Nothing unusual about that, except for one detail. The Meridian Star had sunk 3 years ago in a violent storm 200 miles north of my position. All hands had been lost. I watched transfixed as it moved steadily through the fog. Unlike the other phantom ships, this one was heading directly toward the lighthouse, toward the treacherous rocks that had claimed countless vessels over the centuries. I frantically activated the foghorn, but as before, the sound seemed swallowed by the mist. I grabbed the radio. Vessel approaching Blackrock Point. This is Blackrock Lighthouse. You are on collision course with the shoreline. Alter course immediately. Repeat, alter course immediately. No response came. The ship continued its approach, showing no signs of slowing or turning. In desperation, I grabbed the emergency flare gun kept in the lantern room and fired a red flare directly over the approaching vessel. The bright light briefly illuminated the fog, casting an eerie red glow over the scene. In that moment of illumination, I saw the deck of the Meridian Star clearly. It was crowded with figures, dozens of them, standing motionless, all facing the lighthouse. Even at this distance, I could feel their eyes on me. The ship was less than half a mile from the rocks now. I fired another flare, then another, my hands shaking so badly I nearly dropped the gun. The Meridian Star didn't alter its course. It continued straight toward Blackrock Point, picking up speed. I couldn't watch. I turned away, covering my ears, waiting for the terrible sound of metal tearing against rock, for the screams that would surely follow. Nothing came. Just the continued silence. When I finally looked back, the ship was gone. No wreckage, no oil slick, no sign it had ever existed. I staggered down to my quarters, my mind racing. What was happening? Was I losing my grip on reality? Had 30 years of solitude finally broken something essential inside me? I pulled out my phone and scrolled through the photos I'd taken over the past 10 days. They were all there, each phantom ship captured in perfect digital clarity. Whatever was happening, it wasn't just in my head. I decided to break protocol. The next morning, I would leave the lighthouse and make my way to the village. Someone had to know what was happening, someone had to help, but when morning came, I couldn't bring myself to go. The fog seemed thicker than ever, and something about it felt malevolent, as if it was waiting for me to step into its embrace. Instead, I went deeper into the lighthouse records, searching for patterns, for explanations, for anything that might help me understand. What I found chilled me to the bone. Every 30 years, like clockwork, the logs described the same phenomenon: a persistent fog, phantom ships, and increasingly disturbing encounters. Each cycle lasted precisely 30 days, ending on the 30th night with the appearance of a modern vessel that should not have been there. The last cycle had been in 1993, the year before I took over as keeper. My predecessor, Malcolm Reed, had documented everything in meticulous detail, including the final night when he witnessed the cruise ship Atlantic Duchess, which had sunk 6 months earlier, approach the rocks. His final entry read, "They are coming for another. The sea demands its due. God forgive me for what I've done." Reed had been found dead the next morning, apparently from a heart attack. I'd never met the man, but I'd heard he was well respected, if somewhat eccentric in his later years. Now I understood his eccentricity. He had seen what I was seeing. He had known what it meant, but what had he done that required forgiveness? I searched the older records, looking for accounts of the 30th night from previous cycles. Most ended abruptly, the keeper in question either dying or leaving service immediately afterward, but a few contained cryptic references. 1963, the exchange is made, the waters are appeased for another cycle. 1933, one soul for many, a terrible bargain, but what choice do we have? 1903, I have done my duty, though it damns me. The lighthouse must remain. A horrible suspicion began to form in my mind. I thought of the figures on the deck of the Meridian Star, all staring at the lighthouse, at me. I thought of Malcolm Reed's final words, "The sea demands its due." I needed to know more. There had to be additional records, information that wasn't kept in the official logs. I searched the lighthouse from top to bottom, looking for hidden compartments, secret caches, anything that might contain the truth. In a storage room near the base of the tower, behind a loose stone in the wall, I found it, a small tin box rusted with age. Inside was a leather-bound journal and a tarnished silver key. The journal belonged to Arthur Thorne, the first keeper of Blackrock Lighthouse, and I discovered with shock my great-great-grandfather. I had known my family had a connection to the lighthouse, but not that we had been its first keepers. The journal told a story that defied belief, yet explained everything. Blackrock Point had always been a place of death. Before the lighthouse, countless ships had broken apart on its jagged teeth. But it wasn't just the rocks that made it dangerous. There was something in the waters here, something ancient and hungry. The local fishermen knew. They called it the Deep One and left offerings at the shoreline, small tokens at first, then livestock, and in times of desperation, criminals condemned to die. When the lighthouse was built in 1883, the offerings stopped. The authorities dismissed the old superstitions, and for a time it seemed the modern age had triumphed over ancient fears. Then the fog came. Phantom ships appeared. And on the 30th night, a modern vessel, one that had no business being there, approached the rocks. Arthur Thorne watched in horror as it smashed against the shore, but no wreckage was found the next day, no bodies washed ashore. The ship and all aboard had simply vanished. The pattern repeated 30 years later, and again 30 years after that. Each time, a ship that had already been lost elsewhere appeared at Blackrock Point and vanished into the mist. Until 1903, when Arthur Thorne made a terrible discovery. The key in the box opened a hidden door at the base of the lighthouse, leading to a chamber beneath the rocks. There he found evidence of what had happened to the missing ships and their crews. They had been taken, claimed by something that lived in the depths. The lighthouse, meant to save lives, had instead become a beacon for this entity, drawing ships to their doom. But Arthur also discovered the bargain that had been struck by the original builders. One soul, freely given, would appease the hunger for another 30 years. One keeper, sacrificing themselves to save countless others. Arthur made that choice in 1903. He used the key, opened the door beneath the lighthouse, and walked into the fog. His body was never found. In 1933, the keeper was Arthur's son. In 1963, his grandson. In 1993, Malcolm Reed, no relation, but he had learned the truth and accepted the burden. And now, in 2023, it was my turn. The 30th night was tomorrow. I closed the journal, my hands shaking. I was the last of the Thorne line. I had no children, no family to speak of. Was that why I had been drawn to this place 30 years ago? Some ancestral calling to fulfill the bargain when the time came. I spent the day in a daze, going through my duties mechanically while my mind raced. I could leave, I could break the cycle, let whatever was coming happen without my participation, but the journal was clear about the consequences. If the bargain was not honored, the entity would not be satisfied with a single vessel. It would call ship after ship to their doom, feeding its insatiable hunger until the sea itself was empty. As night fell on the 30th day, I made my decision. I climbed to the lantern room at 23 o'clock and waited. The fog pressed against the glass, thicker than ever, seeming almost solid in its density. The beacon cut through it in steady sweeps, but the light traveled no more than a few yards before being swallowed by the mist. At precisely 23:15, it appeared. Not a phantom ship from the past, but a Coast Guard cutter, the Port Carlisle Guardian. I recognized it immediately. It had been lost with all hands during a rescue attempt in a violent storm 6 months ago. 17 souls had gone down with it. I watched as it approached the lighthouse, cutting through the impossible stillness of the water. On its deck stood 17 figures, motionless and silent, all staring up at the lantern room. I knew what I had to do. I took the tarnished key from my pocket and made my way down the spiral staircase to the base of the lighthouse. Behind a maintenance panel that I had never paid much attention to, I found the keyhole. The key turned with surprising ease, as if the lock had been recently oiled. The panel swung open to reveal a narrow passage leading down into darkness. I grabbed a flashlight and stepped through. The passage descended steeply, carved directly into the rock beneath the lighthouse. The air grew colder as I descended, and I could hear the sound of water lapping against stone. The passage opened into a circular chamber about 30 feet across. The center was occupied by a pool of black water, perfectly still despite the proximity of the ocean. Around the edges of the room were artifacts, personal effects from every keeper who had come before me, arranged in a neat timeline. Arthur Thorne's pocket watch, his son's pipe, his grandson's reading glasses, Malcolm Reed's wedding ring. And at the end, an empty space, waiting for my contribution. I approached the pool and shone my flashlight into its depths. The beam disappeared into blackness, revealing nothing. From outside I heard the foghorn sound, a single mournful note that shouldn't have been possible. The automated system was off. No one was there to activate it manually. I knew what it meant. The Guardian had reached the rocks. I removed my lighthouse keeper's badge, the same one that had been passed down through generations of Thorns, and placed it in the empty space among the artifacts. Then I turned to the pool. The surface began to ripple, though there was no breeze to disturb it. The ripples grew larger, concentric circles expanding outward until they lapped at the edge of the stone. Something was rising from the depths. I had expected tentacles, some monstrous appendage reaching up to drag me down. What emerged instead was far more terrifying. A face, human in its general features but wrong in every detail. The skin was pale and translucent, revealing a network of black veins beneath. The eyes were huge and entirely black, reflecting nothing. The mouth, when it opened, revealed row upon row of needle-like teeth. Yet despite its alienness, I recognized it. I had seen that face before, in dreams I'd forgotten upon waking, in the corner of my eye during long nights in the lantern room, in the patterns of foam on the waves below. It had always been here, watching, waiting. "You are the last Thorn," it said, its voice like water rushing through a narrow cave. "The bargain ends with you. What happens then?" I asked, surprised at the steadiness of my own voice. "Then we are free, the hunger grows, the fog expands. And if I fulfill the bargain, if I give myself willingly," the thing smiled, a terrible stretching of its too wide mouth, "then 30 more years of quiet, but no more after that. No more thorns to bind us." I thought of the village 7 miles inland, of the shipping lanes that passed near Blackrock Point, of the thousands who would die if this entity and whatever it represented were freed from their constraints. "What if I could offer you something more?" I said. "Not just one soul but many, not just 30 years but forever." The black eyes regarded me with sudden interest. "Speak." "The lighthouse," I said. "It draws ships to you, that's what my ancestors discovered. What if I could ensure it never goes dark? What if I could guarantee a steady supply, far beyond what you've been taking?" "How?" The word was hungry, eager. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. On it was the email I'd received last month, the one informing me that Blackrock Lighthouse was being decommissioned next year, its function to be replaced by automated buoys and GPS systems. "They're shutting down the lighthouse," I said. "No more keeper, no more beacon to draw ships to you, unless we make a new bargain. I stay, not as a sacrifice but as your servant. I maintain the light. I ensure ships continue to pass near Blackrock Point, and in return you take only what I direct to you, the vessels I mark with a red light from the lantern room." The entity was silent for a long moment, considering. Then it smiled again, wider than before, black water dripping from between its needle teeth. "A clever Thorn, very well. You will be our keeper now, not just of the lighthouse, but of the hunger. You will feed us and we will permit your continued existence." "I need your word," I said. "No ships taken except those I mark, no expansion beyond these waters." "You have it," the thing said, though something in its voice suggested amusement at my presumption. "Now seal our bargain." It extended a hand, 5-fingered like a human's but webbed and ending in sharp black claws. I hesitated only briefly before taking it. The skin was cold and slick, like touching a corpse that had been in water too long. "The bargain is made," it said, and pulled me forward with unexpected strength. I fell to my knees at the edge of the pool, my hand still gripped in its inhuman grasp. With its other hand it reached up and touched my forehead. Pain exploded behind my eyes, white-hot and all-consuming. I would have screamed if I could have found the breath. Images flooded my mind. Ships breaking apart on rocks, bodies sinking into black depths, things moving in the darkness of the ocean floor that had never been seen by human eyes. When the pain subsided, I found myself alone in the chamber. The pool was still again, its surface unbroken, but I could feel it watching me from below. I staggered to my feet and made my way back up the passage to the lighthouse proper. Each step was agony, my body suddenly feeling decades older than its 53 years. When I reached the lantern room, the fog was gone. The night was clear, stars shining brilliantly overhead. In the distance, I could see the running lights of a cargo ship passing safely beyond the rocks. I checked the time, 23:45. 30 minutes had passed since the Guardian had appeared. I looked out to where I had last seen it, expecting empty water. Instead, I saw wreckage, pieces of a Coast Guard cutter scattered across the surface, illuminated by the sweeping beam of the lighthouse. My blood ran cold. Had I failed? Had the entity taken the ship despite our bargain? I grabbed my binoculars and focused on the largest piece of debris. Painted on its side was a name, Port Carlisle Sentinel, not the Guardian, a different cutter entirely. I quickly radioed the Coast Guard station. "This is Blackrock Lighthouse. I've spotted wreckage approximately 1 mile offshore. Appears to be from the Sentinel. Request immediate search and rescue." The response was immediate. "Blackrock, this is Coast Guard Station Port Carlisle. Say again. The Sentinel is currently docked at our station." "I'm looking at wreckage with the name Sentinel clearly visible," I insisted. "Stand by, Blackrock." A few minutes later, the radio crackled again. "Blackrock, we've confirmed the Sentinel is secure at dock. However, we've just received a distress call from the fishing vessel Northern Star, reporting engine failure near your position. We're dispatching a rescue boat now." I trained my binoculars on the wreckage again. In the shifting light of the beacon, I could now see that what I had taken for Sentinel was actually Northern Star, the letters partially obscured by damage. A chill ran through me as I understood. The entity had kept its word technically. It hadn't taken the Guardian, a ship I hadn't marked. Instead, it had claimed another vessel, one that had the misfortune to suffer engine failure near Blackrock Point tonight. I looked down at my hand, the one that had clasped the entities to seal our bargain. In the palm was a mark, a small, perfect circle that seemed to shift between black and deep blue depending on the light. The bargain was made, but I had been naive to think I could control what was in the depths. It would feed, with or without my permission. The most I could hope for was to direct its hunger toward those who deserved such a fate, if anyone truly did. I am still at Blackrock Lighthouse. The decommissioning never happened. The email about it vanished from my phone, and when I called to inquire, they had no record of any such plan. As far as the authorities are concerned, Blackrock will remain manned and operational indefinitely. I've made modifications to the lantern room, a special filter that can cast the main beam in red when activated. I use it sparingly, only for vessels that won't be missed, smugglers, illegal fishing operations, the occasional pleasure yacht owned by someone whose crimes have gone unpunished by conventional justice. It's a terrible responsibility playing judge and executioner, but the alternative is worse. I've seen what waits in the depths, what would be unleashed if the lighthouse went dark. So I remain at my post, the last of the thorns, keeper of a different kind of light now, one that doesn't save lives but chooses which ones to take. And on foggy nights, when the mist rolls in from the east against the natural flow of wind and weather, I climb to the lantern room and watch the phantom ships sail past, the Meridian, the Eliza Jane, the Guardian, and now the Northern Star. They pass in silent procession, their crews standing at the rails, watching the lighthouse with empty eyes, watching me, reminding me of the bargain I've made and the price that must be paid, forever.